This week on the Unabated podcast, Jack and I are back with another member story episode talking to Unabated member BDubz about his journey from the world of bonds trading to sports betting.
Unabated. That's the new word, unabated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast, sponsored by Bet105. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me, as always, Mr. Unabated himself, Captain Jack Andrews. Jack, we've got another great episode this week. Last month, we did our first member story episode where we highlighted an unabated member in Even Stevens and his journey into the world of professional sports betting. This week, we're back with another one. Not a professional sports bettor, but as he calls himself on the show, a proficient sports bettor. It's a side hustle, but I'm very excited for this conversation with our own member BDubz. Very interesting story. I'm looking forward to hearing him tell it.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea because you can always find something in the story that, wow, that fits what I do, or I started that way, or I have a similar job, or that's how he juggles it all and balances it all out. I think as we do more of these, people are going to find something that helps them get further along in their journey to become a sharper sports bettor. Even Steven last month, I thought that was great. I learned some different things, and you could really tell that he had put a lot of thought into that idea of going pro. This week we got BDubz. He is not a professional bettor. He's a side hustler. That's going to resonate with even more people. And maybe they're like, how long can I sustain this side hustle? Tom, I think we've stumbled onto a great recurring episode idea here. So I'm looking forward to getting into episode number 2.
I am too. I like that. I feel like you can split up our podcast episodes into 3 different categories. We have our professional episodes. Last week we had on Rufus and Tom talking about the Masters. We've had on guys like Alex Kane, operators, people who are true experts in the field and have expert advice and opinions. Then we have our new us episodes where we're getting a little introspective with our questions to each other and people can relate to us. And I think these episodes serve such a great third pillar of these are I don't want to say the everyman episodes, but they're the every better episodes of, hey, this is how these people got their very relatable start in the sports betting world. This is the advice that they have for you because it's a path that you can see yourself going down. I don't know about you. I personally can't see myself ever becoming the next Rufus, but hearing the stories from guys like Even Stevens and BDubz, you see it and you could be like, okay, I understand the path here. This is it's a cool perspective to get on everything.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
Let's do it. But first, here's a word from our sponsor. The Unabated podcast is sponsored by Bet105. Looking for a sports book that puts you first? Bet105 delivers with -105 odds on most markets. Better pricing, bigger profits. No limits on winners means they won't ban you for being good, and you can enjoy fast crypto payouts with instant withdrawals and no hassle. Transparent limits let you know exactly what you can bet with no guesswork. Backed by respected bettors and recognized by top pros, Bet105 is the sharp, friendly book you can trust. Join the community where winning is welcome. Use the promo code UNABATED and get a $50 bonus bet when you deposit your first $100 today. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome on into the Unabated podcast here for our second ever member story. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm excited to be here and nice to meet you guys.
So our last member story that we did, we had on Even Steven. For anyone that hasn't checked it out, it was a great story about his journey into the world of professional sports betting. Today, Brad, you're not quite on the full-time professional bandwagon here. You still have a full-time day job, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your journey into betting, how you got started, what your process is like, and hopefully learn a whole lot more. I'm very much looking forward to it. But before we get started, why don't I give the people a little bit of background about who Brad is? What is it that you do?
Yeah, sure. So by trade, I'm a corporate bond trader. That's the business that I've been in for 21 years now. I started in the business when I was 19, still working in college. Other than that, I'm an avid sports fan. I grew up a Denver sports fan, so I'm diehard Nuggets, Broncos, Avalanche, Rockies. And, I always am the type of person who likes to put together the puzzle. not like literal puzzles, but just the pieces of trying to figure something out. So, chasing risk or that sort of thrill, that's not really my thing. I like putting the puzzle together and trying to win something that you're not supposed to win at.
I like that. I mean, if only I knew someone else who described sports betting as a logic puzzle, right, Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so my good friend Alfonso Straffen used to be a bond trader, and so
I've
I've
actually conversed with him a little bit.
yeah, a great guy. Would love to have him on the podcast sometime. And so he's told me a lot about like what goes into it and how the synergies exist that kept his mind always thinking the same as when he had come up as a he used to work at offshore sports books. That's how he kind of got into that. So he went from sports betting to bond trading. You went from bond trading to sports betting. What was that bridge and how did that evolve for you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of synergies. Um, the sports betting market is really more akin to the options market, as opposed to the bond market. But you're still just working with normal market making dynamics. You still have the normal price discovery process. So that portion of, I can't remember whether it was interception or uh,
Logic.
logic of sports betting. Yeah. But that whole process was real familiar to me, and wasn't really very difficult to pick up. So that's sort of the basis of where the confluence between those two things starts. And then from there, you're just branching off into other sorts of, you see more parallels the further along down the sports betting road you go. There's a lot more parallels to trading than you maybe thought going in. You think going into sports betting, it's all about knowing teams, knowing players, and knowing the rules of the game and all that. And there is some of that, but you're more engaged, or at least for me, I was more engaged in the market dynamics of the sports betting process.
And how is it that you got started into the sports betting world? Because obviously, once you get in, you see, oh, hey, this is really all about markets, not about picking teams. But what was it that was the impetus that got you in the door?
Yeah, actually, the very first sports bet that I made was just with a buddy of mine on his All Star Sports account, and this was back in the Carmelo Anthony Nuggets days, and we bet the Nuggets in the over and pushed both of them. And that was my very first sports bet. And that was my first clue that these lines makers are really, really good. And so that was, thank God I didn't win my first bet and thinking that it was easy money and you can just know the teams and make money hand over fist and never have to work again in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I learned really quickly that that's not the way to beat sports betting. I did end up going down the route of doing other stupid things like, because I just took sports betting very casually for a while, and doing stupid things that young mid 20-year-old kids do, buying picks and that kind of stupid stuff. But then coming up into 2018 after PASPA, then I started taking things more seriously and trying to solve the logic puzzle. And I went down the route of using Bet Labs, which at the time was a okay product. It was it gave me a good idea of kind of other ways to attack sports betting. I don't think it was really particularly effective. I just sort of treaded water doing that, but it was a good start until I ventured into other things and learned how to actually do things the right way.
So in the office, I'm just curious about this. In the office, are there other people that see the crossover between bonds trading or, as you mentioned, options trading and sports markets? Or is it seen as sports as an inferior product compared to what you're doing in higher stakes financial markets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm the only in my office. I'm the only actual what I would consider like a serious sports bettor. Other people dabble casually just for fun and entertainment, which is totally fine. So I don't think that there's necessarily like looking down the tip of your nose at being involved in it. I think a lot of people see a little bit of like they're sort of romanticized by it. They think it's cool. They think it's fun. They're kind of blown away that there are so many similarities. But then they don't necessarily go down the road to explore it for themselves. Which I don't try to influence anyone into doing that. Just talking to people, they seem to think it's a cool, fun, interesting thing that is interesting because it has so much overlap.
It makes perfect sense as the hobby for someone who like that's your day job, and then you get to go home and really apply a lot of those same skills and make it work. Is it more fun for you because it's a hobby? Do you kind of see that as this is my escape from work, or do you see it as more of a part-time job kind of thing?
No, it definitely. I don't know if I necessarily see it as an escape, but I don't view it at like it doesn't grind on me the way like a job would. I do find it fun. Even though like all of it's really menial and tedious. It's fun for me still, and I don't know why it's fun. Like entering stuff into a spreadsheet isn't fun, but the whole process itself and solving the logic puzzle, like we've talked about, is the fun part. There's a huge payoff with that makes all the menial and tedious work worth it.
One of the things that I know about financial markets is in financial markets, there's less debate about like things like the Kelly criterion because that is sort of just like baked in theorem when it comes to financial markets on optimal growth patterns. Has that been easier for you? Is using like Kelly betting easier having that background?
Yeah, I mean, in my role, Kelly criterion is more of sort of a optimization for portfolio management, and not so much so within just the function of trading a book. So within the function of trading the book, you're just kind of trying to make markets and like you're paying attention to bets, to position sizes and stuff like that. But the actual application of Kelly isn't really something that we delve into. But in terms of grasping the concept of Kelly at the start, it's certainly helpful. Yeah, because you're kind of just doing that on a whim, or not necessarily on a whim, but like you're sort of freewheeling that anyway as you're managing your own book of positions.
So have you used Kelly with your own betting?
With my own betting, yeah. I mostly do Kelly staking, quarter Kelly staking. For props, I do flat staking. But for pretty much everything else, I do Kelly staking.
Now, back when we were doing our little pre-interview here, talking about the Cliff Notes version of your story before we got on the pod, you mentioned one of the main catalysts for you involved Kelly Criterion for getting really started into serious sports betting and profitable sports betting. It was a conversation you had with someone. Can you tell me a little bit about the backstory of the conversation, what went on there?
Yeah. So this was back in 2020, I believe. And one of the only sports, through the summer was golf. And so I was using data golf to attack those markets. And that was not going super well to start. And it was kind of frustrating. And so I was reading some on their blog and they talk about Kelly staking. And I looked into it a little bit more and I couldn't quite grasp exactly how to do it, which is a big stumbling block for me. If I don't have the exact process down, then I get frustrated with it. So I reached out to a very prominent gambling Twitter personality who is also on this podcast. And he helped me directly, show me where the flaw was in my Kelly criterion formula, which wasn't, it was an obvious flaw. But then explain essentially how to use it. And after I did that, then that's when sort of the golf betting took off. And, because it was just a function of not betting the proper edges with the proper size, really under betting matchups and over betting finish positions.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, because the finish positions are much lower likelihood events and matchups are not. So
Right.
that's really what where my hangup was before I started implementing Kelly. And after that, then things smoothed out a lot. You know, I know Jack always says that Kelly's not going to make a losing better into a winning better, um, but it certainly helped me.
Yeah, I do remember that conversation.
Yeah,
And I was talking more about like those matchups are, that's the low standard deviation stuff. You want to load up on them. And look, since then, I've gotten to know Rufus's process a little bit more, and he agrees. Like he loves to load up on those matchups, and
yeah,
the long shots are, you know, they're the long shots.
yeah. You,
Now
you
he,
just you dabble.
yeah, and now he loads up on the no side of things, and we were talking about with that last week on the podcast. But
Yeah,
okay, so let's talk a little bit more about your process. You work all day.
yeah.
When do you squeeze in all this? When do you have time for the Discord? And when do you have time to like see what the lines are? And when the key moments when lines are moving? How do you work that? And then how do you manage betting as well as being a family man?
Yeah.
How does it all work together?
Yeah, it's all a lot. One of the nice things about the unabated screen is it looks a lot like a financial market screen. So that being up on my computer all day is rather inconspicuous. No
It's great.
one's the wiser. So that's nice. Even though lately, so that was really my process early on was doing the starting a little bit before the unabated odds screen launched. I was just using the wager talk screen, but um, I that was a good bankroll builder doing just the normal what everyone else considers like top down, the board clearing, steam chasing. And so doing that during the day really wasn't terribly cumbersome. I could just have the screen up all day while I'm at work. And when I see something flash, I can jump on it. So that was pretty easy. I've gravitated away from that more lately. I feel like the easy money has been made there, and there's a lot more competition. Books know what you're doing. So now my process has more evolved into looking for those second order bets, and utilizing the unabated line to essentially use an efficient line against the inefficient parts of the market, which I still consider that to be a top down approach. I'm not modeling my own numbers. So it's definitely not a bottom up approach. I would still consider it to be top down. And so doing that, I get a lot of ability. I lean on Gambly to help me with that. It speeds up the process quite a bit. The thing about Gambly is you have to know what to prompt. And that's where the education that I've had through Unabated and knowing the tools well, and knowing what edges are going to be real and what edges you want to look at and where the edge thresholds are, that's all invaluable and at absolute requirement for using Gambly. So that helps me to really attack those markets right before game time for the most part. I mean, not right before, but during the period of the most efficiency.
Yeah, you mentioned that you consider that top down. There are people who consider that now to be originating, but they're not really originating. They're taking some
Really.
other source and then applying it to a secondary market. Now, when we say secondary markets, we're talking about things that might not be on the main screen, whether they be alt lines, whether they be quarter prices, half prices, period prices, first inning, third. You can go down the line of all these secondary markets. I don't want to, spoil it, but there's plenty of edges to be found out there that where you're basing yourself on some main rock, and then you're finding the offshoots of where to find the value, with not just on the main screen where everybody else is hunting for that same value. And a follow-up question to that is the use of AI. So Gambly, for those that don't know, is an AI tool that allows you to find value in sports betting markets. It's powered by Unabated, so I think the numbers are pretty accurate. It doesn't give away our secret sauce in any way in terms of the edges, but it will find edges for you, or it will find lines for you where maybe you don't see those lines on an on screen. So when you're approaching something like this, how did you stumble upon it, Gambly, to do this? How did you decide that, okay, I need AI to leverage myself forward?
Yeah. I saw Gambly, I believe, just in the Unabated Discord and decided to check it out. I am like acquaintances with Peter, and so I reached out to him to ask him about it, and he kind of gave the green light and his blessing to peruse it. So it was really just born out of necessity. You know, trying to attack all of the really, I started using it during college football season. So trying to attack all the first half college football lines before they all tip off at, or kick off at, I guess it's 10 a.m. here. That can be very, very cumbersome. And Gambly smoothed that out and made it a lot faster and increased my volume on that quite a bit.
Very nice.
Yeah, Gambly has been a really cool thing. I've started to use it a lot more in my handicap, well, not handicapping, but in my sports betting. It's the new frontier of new tools and new things, and we're sitting on a very interesting precipice with AI and what you can really start to do with it when it comes to helping you both with originating and with finding these secondary markets, finding these other things.
Yeah, kind of on that same topic, I got everyone in my office doing a Calcutta for March Madness now.
Nice.
And so we have a bunch of prop bets. We have like 80% of the pot that's set up for total wins. And then 20% is set aside for props, like largest blowout in the first round, largest blowout for the tournament, the last double-digit seed to get knocked out, the lowest seed to win a Sweet 16 game, those kind of things. So the first few years that we did this, I was just using Circa's lines to kind of price things out. And it wasn't really capturing, there wasn't really a good way to price out all those props. So this year, I just took KenPom's ratings and had ChatGPT build a model in Google Sheets, and it did phenomenal. I was stunned at how well it did. I mean, it nailed the biggest blowout for the first round and for the tournament. Like the I think it was American or Mount St. Mary's, whichever what team Duke played. It had them as the highest likelihood to win that prop bet by a mile.
And this was a good year for, not to say that the sample size is tainted, but this was a good year for
it was.
A simple model kicked ass this year.
It absolutely did.
When it comes to this, how much modeling experience in your background do you have before you sat there and said, okay, I can trust ChatGPT to build this for me, and then I know enough that I can go and just double check to make sure this is working right?
Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit. I always get hung up in the data gathering and cleaning process, and then that's the part of model building that's really not fun. And that's what ChatGPT was really good about, was cleaning everything up and creating essentially like synthetic data for it. And so that gave me enough comfort to trust what ChatGPT was doing. And plus, this wasn't really a high dollar stake Calcutta anyway. I think the total pot, it just wasn't worth putting a whole lot of extra time into. But it was a fun exercise nonetheless.
Yeah. Do you ever see yourself going full time? You seem to be a fairly successful side hustler. You seem to like your job. Do you ever feel like you might go full time?
I really did think so. A couple of years ago, I was very, I thought I would go that route eventually. And then, the steam chasing got a lot more difficult, and I started realizing how difficult it was going to be to gather new accounts and get fresh outs. And I was going to need to bring people on and to help me do all that. And the task of setting up a trading and account gathering operation to really make it worthwhile to replace my current income. Just wasn't really something that I thought would be worthwhile to go down. If I was, 23, 24, I would definitely do it, but being, 40 with a wife and 3 kids and a mortgage, there's a lot more to lose.
Yeah, a lot more riding on that one.
Yeah, a little bit more riding. So yeah, I don't see that happening. But it is definitely a fun and profitable side hustle. And, I don't like to call myself like a professional bettor, but I would say like I'm a proficient bettor.
Oh, I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be something we have to start using. When it comes to going back towards going back towards a little bit of your bonds trading experience here, what are your thoughts on these prediction markets that have really started popping up as of late? It's certainly been a hot topic in the news, and we're kind of waiting more onto your professional side here.
Sure.
Should they be considered bonds/securities? Do you think? What do you think?
Well, definitely not a bond.
Mm-hmm.
But you can make a case that they're a security. Actually, so back like probably 2006, 2007, I started perusing and going down the route of trying to see if there was a way to bring futures contracts onto the CBOE. And one of the things that I came across, one of the criteria is that there has to be a viable economic interest to the contract. And so some of those prediction markets have that, some of them don't. Like some of them are just silly nonsense, but some of them are absolutely viable. The presidential election is absolutely a viable contract. So you'd be hard pressed to convince me that it shouldn't be a security. That's just full disclosure. Like that's just talking as a market participant, not any sort of like a legal or regulatory opinion at all. That's just me talking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I personally, I don't know which way the CFTC is going to go, whether it's going to be thumbs up, thumbs down, or just cover their mouth and not say anything for as long as possible. But it's going to be very impactful to the future of sports betting in the U.S. So we're all kind of waiting to see what happens next.
Yeah.
If you were a betting man, where do you think it's going?
If I were a betting man, I don't know the time frame of it, but I would bet that we will see some sort of prediction market contract on an exchange, on a regulated CFTC regulated exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, Brad, before we get you out of here, we don't do a ton of these interviews quite yet when it comes to these member stories, but I feel like one of the great things about them is it's a great way for people to relate to someone who has gone down a path that they're looking to go down. And so for that, we have a couple questions for you here for the people who might be looking at you and saying, that's something I want to do. That's something I'm interested in, taking that path in sports betting. So what advice would you give yourself now from 5, 10 years ago? What would you most wish that you knew back then when you got started in this?
Yeah, the thing that I would probably most like to tell someone now is that it's much more difficult to rebuild your bankroll than it is to build your bankroll. I pulled a lot of my bankroll out to buy some small businesses, which is a good decision. It's the right decision. But I have found that it's a lot harder to stay really engaged when your bankroll isn't the size that you're accustomed to. So rebuilding your bankroll is a much more difficult task than building it. And like someone tends to say, the best thing your bankroll can buy for you is a bigger bankroll. And that is absolutely true. And even though I didn't fully listen to that advice and use the money to invest in some other things, it's still the concept is still the same. Rebuilding your bankroll is much more difficult than building it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I don't think that gets mentioned enough. So and you're right, that level of engagement. If you were betting, and people can think how that much that could be true is like if you're used to operating at this level, and now you have to operate down here and kind of go back up. You're not as, it just doesn't do it for you anymore. Yeah.
You're just not, and it has nothing to do with the thrill of it. Like I don't get the thrill of the risk of loss, but it's just mentally not as engaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's not as much on the line. I mean, at the end of the day, we are still all gamblers, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, my next question.
Sorry.
All good. Now, my next question for you. If you were to suggest to someone who is just getting into sports betting, just starting down this path and wants to follow a similar process to what you've done, where should they start? What's square one, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this might be a little bit surprising. I think the best place to start now, today, or I should say in 6 months, is NFL partial game derivatives.
Hmm.
I think that's your best place to start. I think that's going to teach a new better how to lose, which I think is very, very critical. I don't think you want to jump into buying projections for quarterback passing props and think you're just going to crush the market. That's not going to happen. I think the easy money has been made in steam chasing, just the traditional board clearing top down stuff. I think the money's been made there, and it's too obvious to the books, and it can blow up your accounts. I learned that pretty quickly. So I think the NFL partial game derivatives are the best place to start. They'll teach you how to bet, how to lose, how to win, and just sort of teach you how the market works. Beyond that, I would then say to venture into the unabated NBA props. That kind of gives you another step towards how you put together the logic puzzle, especially going through the Discord with the team there. They're phenomenal with that. And then the third thing that I would recommend actually would be college football futures. Being something that you can sort of nibble on, and it's not going to throw a lot of red flags up at the books. So I think in terms of like starting with some account longevity plays, if you want to throw in some NFL same game parlays, that's great. Do that, but do it with a logical approach, and that's where the interception book can be very helpful. I wouldn't expect to get rich playing those. I would use those as effectively cover play, but I think those 3/4 approaches, you'll get quite a bit of rope with the books still. I think that's the best way for a newbie to start.
I love that that's the tact that you're taking with it, of not just building a bankroll. If you want to say what are the bets to go and start building a bankroll and winning some money quick, player props are a good market to get started in. But the problem that a lot of people do come across when they do that is they don't understand how this works. They don't understand how limiting works. They don't understand how sports books won't take your action after a while, and they can burn through some really valuable accounts really quickly. I think you just laid out a great roadmap of especially taking into focus, hey, you're going to need these accounts later on. You can't burn through them right now.
Yeah, precisely. People that aren't involved in this are stunned when I tell them that I can bet $113 on an NFL side on Sunday morning at BetMGM.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
That is impressive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, man, that is some great advice. You answered both of those questions with unique answers that I couldn't even have thought of. And I think that's a testament to like a lot of our members at Unabated are finding their own path. We're not all, bet this when it flashes green on the screen. There's a lot of different paths out there for people to find. You find your own way with sports betting. That's what makes it such a almost like a lifelong play. Is you can always find something that somebody else hasn't touched yet, or you can find something that's already been trampled down, or you can find something different in even that. So yeah, Brad, this was great. You opened my eyes to some ideas, and I think a lot of our listeners are probably better off for having spent these last 30 minutes.
Good. I appreciate that.
Well, absolutely. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, full disclosure to everybody, we're recording this on a Friday night here. So we really appreciate you going out of your way to make the time for us here. This has been a fantastic conversation. We really appreciate having you on, being an Unabated member, but also just having an awesome story and some great advice for people out here. Before we get out of here, I've not necessarily anything that you might want to plug, but where can people find you if they want to reach out and connect?
Yeah, on Discord, my handle's BDubz, BDubz, or you can catch me on Twitter or X at Bratley, BRATL3Y. I don't know, it's a lot of political and sports stuff. So if that's not your thing, then it's not your thing. But yeah, that's I'm not on Instagram or anything like that. So
You're not the Dub Club account hasn't been started yet.
no, it is not.
All right, Brad, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you to everyone listening. As always, you know the drill. Leave us that 5-star rating and review, please. It would really help out with growing the pod. And as always, let's cash some tickets. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Thank you, guys.